Well, a lot has happened since we posted our last video. I made a quick trip back to Canada for work, and then COVID-19 started to take a hold around the world.
St. Martin now has a 2-week, 24-hour curfew, so we are staying as isolated as we can on the boat. Even Allie has unexpectedly come to join us since her university is shut down. We're all here together, riding out the pandemic. For this episode, we go back to the spring of 2018, when the area was still recovering from the last major emergency here, Hurricane Irma.
After finally getting down to the boat and assessing the damage, the next step was to try and figure out where to do the repairs. Once the repairs were done, where to keep the boat, until I could find a week to start to do the work properly. I had looked at the marina near where the boat was in East End, and it was in decent shape, but they were not taking any new boats during the hurricane season. I also visited Manual Reef Marina in Sea Cow Bay, where we did our charter back in 2015. The docks were solid concrete and actually in good shape, but there were a lot of sunken boats in half the slips. Considered a comparatively safe bay before Irma, a lot of the boats were in their slips or in the mangroves, but few survived. Being only 6 months after the hurricanes, there was still a lot of cleanup to go.
Dad also visited Soper's Hole in the West End, one of our favorite spots, and unfortunately it was even worse shape. The Puzzers restaurant had reopened, kind of, and was offering a basic menu. Very little else was operational, and certainly there was nowhere to dock. Even in downtown Roadtown, where there are a couple more marinas, the damage was still extreme, with ferries washed up on the shore.
I was happy to pay someone locally to watch over the boat, especially since the marine industry was hurting so much, but my top priority was not to put a strain on anything or anyone. The main boatyard in Tortola, Nanny Key, was not taking new boats at the time, so I decided to get a tow over to Virgin Gorda to get hauled out at the Virgin Gorda Yacht Harbor. Remember, I had not seen under the waterline yet and had no idea how bad the hulls, prop shafts, rudders, or keels might look. This is where it could have been a looming nightmare. Virgin Gorda Yacht Harbor had been tidying up its yard for the last few months since Irma, and we were actually the first boat to be hauled out and put into the yard after they'd righted all the boats that had toppled over. The travel lift hauling out Bateau Soleil seemed to take forever. I was waiting impatiently to see whether there were any nicks, dings, or bent or damaged parts underneath the boat that I wouldn't be able to fix. As she cruised by, I had a quick look underneath and everything looked okay, but there also was about 6 months worth of growth on the bottom, so I couldn't really see. I was going to have to wait until they did a quick wash to find out really what I was dealing with.
Fortunately, once the hole was cleaned, everything looked okay. Dad was lucky, as there are only a few gouges in the gel coat and nothing down to the fiberglass. Looking around the yard, not all the boats had fared so well.
I breathed a sigh of relief and headed to the baths, an amazing rock formation on the beach in Virgin Gorda, one of our favorite spots in the world, for a quick, refreshing swim, before I got on with the start of the repair work. Fortunately, the baths were actually in pretty good shape. The walkways that locals built were reasonably intact, and there was no major erosion, which is excellent for their top tourist destination.
Like Tortola, Virgin Gorda was badly hit in Irma, and was taking longer to recover. The grocery store where we provisioned last time we were here was destroyed, as most of the buildings were near the marina.
Time to get back to the boat and get to work. I started to grind back the areas of gel coat damage and cleaned out the engine. I replaced the batteries and had the engine serviced so we could get them running, although more work was going to be needed later. Alright, we're now in the boatyard in Virgin Gorda. There's some boats that look a lot worse than Toasty Toes. I have done some work last week or so getting it ashore, everything checked out. Things are in pretty good shape. Let's have a look through. It's almost ready for guests. Settee cleaned up pretty well. A few little marks on the cushions, but a little more scrubbing and they'd come out. It looks pretty darn good. Have to wash the blinds, but otherwise liners, hulls, everything looks really good. Little few repairs as I've gone along, but generally speaking not needed a lot. Starting to show a lot more like it's supposed to. This is a 4-year-old boat. Inside the boat I started to pull down panels and the vinyl wall to see how badly damaged they were. The main salon and port hull responded well to some deep scrubbing, with the master stateroom already looking quite comfortable. I was staying on the boat when it was in the yard, but the AC needs water from the ocean to cool it for it to work. With no breeze and it being about 30 degrees every day, and about 20 degrees warmer than it was in Vancouver, it was a bit tough to get used to. Ultimately, I was only going to have time to do some really quick minor repairs and a deep clean on this trip. The head worked okay, but had a little bit of water leaking. We ended up replacing the head with an electric head in the future, which we'll talk about in another episode. Overall, after a lot of scrubbing, removing all the muck that had blown around the boat, it was starting to look livable. I made temporary repairs to broken windows to keep the elements out. The bulkhead and most of the fiberglass work was going to need to wait until my next trip, in the next video. I fixed some of the lights that had fallen down, but the rest of them were going to have to wait until I could buy some new ones and bring them down and fix them properly. The corner over here that is the bit that is bashed up needs to be fixed properly. I do think I might be able to, use this vinyl that's in here and make it okay. Of course, got a few supplies. I've taped up that window out there, plastic on it, so it should be fine until we come back down in a month or so to fix it properly. The V-berth up here is pretty nice. It's a little small. You'd struggle to fit 2 people in here. I was able to fix any items that had dislodged and get the electronics working. Next, I assessed what electronics were missing or may need replacing so I could buy them in Canada and bring them down. The charter company had taken out parts of the autopilot, the battery charger and inverter, and a few other things like the solar panel would need redoing after being ripped off. Otherwise, the fridge, stove, AC, instruments, fans, lights, water system, and electronics were all in pretty good shape. This is Zoe's bedroom back here, which currently I'm using as storage. This is actually a really nice cabin. Again, all the bedding is in the mattresses are in good shape because they put them in plastic. So there's Toasty Toes. I'm going to replace those back windows, but all in all, she's looking pretty nice though.
The sunsets down here are amazing and beautiful on a calm night. Now it was time for Dad to take the temporary ferry back to Tortola to get ready to fly back home the next day. There was just enough time for one last sunset for Dad at Mayette's in Cane Garden Bay.